Quennell, this week we've had Senator Scott from South Carolina and Governor DeSantis from Florida both announced that they will be seeking the Republican nomination for the next presidential election. We've kind of had a mixed bag result from the main contender, Donald Trump. He seems to be supportive of Tim Scott and highly critical, calling Ron DeSantis a number of names. And you're seeing a lot of Trump supporters do the same. I saw this morning on Twitter a prom photo of DeSantis floating around, and they're being highly critical of how he looked in high school, which is just juvenile and childish. Trump calling him Ron DeSantis. But it's just more of the same, more of this, let's attack somebody that he fears and let's applaud someone he doesn't. When you combine Ron DeSantis' announcement with the NAACP issuing a travel advisory for Florida, it suggests, of course, that Ron DeSantis is this evil racist and that he has turned Florida, which is an incredibly diverse state, into somehow a dangerous space for people of color, which I think is a little bit absurd, right? And this is the new tactic, right? If someone is seen as a viable Republican candidate, they are labeled as a racist to try to mitigate their popularity. And it also allows the Democratic Party, instead of having to reform policies that harm the African American community, to suggest that they are there to represent them and to be more inclusive, instead they just demonize the Republican Party, which clearly doesn't show a lot of interest in building a bigger tent and helping African Americans. But the suggestion that DeSantis is now creating this racist hellhole in Florida, no, there are concerns in Florida. In Miami, crime out of control, right? In Jacksonville, crime out of control. You have a lot of crime in parts of Florida, but it has nothing to do with white supremacy, right? It just seems like the NAACP wanted to get some attention and try to hurt DeSantis' announcement.
When you see Tim Scott, let me start with him announcing that he wants to run for the nomination of the Republican Party to be president. He reminded me of Herschel Walker. I watched some of his announcement, and it reminded me of an old series that was on TV when I was a child called Roots. Tim Scott reminded me of Fiddler and Chicken George. When I watched his announcement, I said, this is a shame. This brother is literally pandering and buck dancing on stage to a demographics that he feels he can connect to because he knows he cannot connect to black people, unfortunately. But Trump is applauding him.
Why can't he connect to black people?
And I'm going to tell you why. Because he refuses to campaign, even as a black man that's a senator in black voting districts where he's from in South Carolina. He ignored every invitation the NAACP and the Urban League and black pastors extended to him to come and meet with them and speak at their churches to put forth his platform. So that's why he cannot connect, because he has no desire to do so. DeSantis, I think that man is more of a legitimate threat to Donald Trump winning the nomination than some people give him credit for. Because he and Donald Trump is really the same. But DeSantis is Donald Trump without the baggage of sexism, without the baggage of racism, without the baggage of associating themselves with right-wing groups and organizations and showing affection for them. He is Donald Trump without the baggage of ongoing investigations and criminal indictments. I think it's wrong to underestimate the potential of a DeSantis nomination because I believe he can win it. Now, the NAACP, a historical black organization that really did so much for black people in the 30s, the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 90s. I was saddened to hear that they told black people to be careful traveling and going to Florida when they never said that about Chicago. I was saddened to hear that they didn't tell black people be careful riding the subways in New York, that they didn't tell black people be careful going to California, where black men and women are being gunned down every day in record numbers across the country and in California. The NAACP has become an old man and woman's organization. They're totally disconnected from the younger generations of black voters and black people. And I'm surprised that they have not changed direction with new leadership, so they can properly communicate with the new voters and the future voters that will make the NAACP more relevant to what it is right now. It's nothing more than an extension, unfortunately, of whatever the Democratic Party wants them to push.
Well, the NAACP, although an older organization, seems to be borrowing a page from the Black Lives Matter organization, not the movement, not generally people that support the value of black lives, but the charitable organization that got billions of dollars from corporate America and then bought mansions
and didn't give one dime to black organizations.
And the NAACP has done far more for people of color than the BLM national organization would ever consider doing, right? You hear all these people who didn't get it, but clearly they want the media attention, the media spectacle, and it felt like this announcement was just seeking media spectacle and trying to assist.
Because they feel like that they're no longer relevant.
Well, I also think they're trying to assist the Democratic Party in marginalizing Ron DeSantis, because the Democrats don't want to see DeSantis win the primary. Now, it's very different from 2016, where the media laid off Trump, and the media saw Trump as the easiest candidate for Hillary Clinton to beat, so they actually kind of propped up his nomination. Whereas here now, I think the media perceives Trump as very beatable for the reasons you stated and many others. And so, they see DeSantis as a real possible threat, because DeSantis has had a tough line on crime. And up until his brouhaha with Disney, which is insane on DeSantis' part, costing Florida $1 billion development and tens of thousands of jobs, because he's in his feelings about his, anti-LGBT and you see they're challenging the poet laureate.
Disney started that fight with him. They didn't start it with Disney. Okay. They started that fight with him.
Well, I think it's a lot of pandering, right? And the
Both,
Republicans,
exactly.
The Republicans
and Disney
need to
was
stop.
pandering to a certain demographics, the LGBT community, and they went after DeSantis, and then he used his bully pulpit to go after them. So who loses?
Well,
the
America loses.
And America loses those who want to travel in and go to Disney.
Maybe we need to focus on how to have a better economy. Maybe we need to focus on all these. Here's the thing. The media and politicians want you angry about racism. They want you angry about transphobia. They want you angry about homophobia. And they want you to look at your fellow American as an enemy, as opposed to unity, because we're easier to control that way. Clearly, both the media, the NAACP, and the Democratic Party see DeSantis as a much greater threat to Biden presidency #2, which of course is absurd. It's absurd that anyone's talking about re-electing Biden with all the corruption that's been exposed, the new corruption, these new whistleblowers saying that the investigative team from the IRS has been pulled off Hunter Biden's case. It's just more corruption, and more failure. The debt ceiling talks, we're going to collapse our own economy, everything's insane.
And I think that there will not be an agreement. I think when it comes to the debt ceiling, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. I think that both parties have a vested interest in one party saying, yes, let's get a solution. But I think the Republican parties want to crash that party because they won't make tax cuts and concessions, and therefore we will default on it. How long it will be, I don't think it'll be long, but I think they want to send a message to strengthen their platform moving forward into this year's election.
The problem is it's going to implode the already suffering economy. It's going to destroy Wall Street, and it's going to be a lot of pain. But we do need to address this incredible multi-trillion-dollar debt. But of course, the Republicans' focus is just social welfare programs. We're talking, the 60 Minutes has just done an investigation. And we all remember when we were much younger, Quanell, about the Pentagon paying $500 for a screwdriver and $1,500 for a toilet seat. Right. And that was famous in the 80s. There was a lot of oversight. But since all this warmongering that started in the 90s and just still hasn't ended, we are spending, $866 billion a year on defense, and most of it's not going to soldiers. Most of it's not going to providing a better life for people that serve in the military. Most of it's going to cronies in contracts, right? To build stuff way overvalued. There's tons of corruption, and there's no austerity talking about there.
But that was not the most shocking part of that segment.
Okay.
With 60 Minutes. The most shocking part to me was we spending billions of dollars for airplanes that we don't even own. America is paying these contractors for the planes, but the internal hardware and infrastructure is still the product and property of the manufacturer. So we're paying for planes and then paying for them to maintain the planes. It's nothing but corruption at its finest, and it's what I said to you several weeks ago on the show. Until corporate dollars no longer control the American government has been hijacked from the American people by corporate rich dollars. But we don't own the country anymore.
But until we start having different conversations, though, you started off talking about Tim Scott. I want to circle back to that. This is a conservative that is nothing like Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker was exposed to being aggressive, violent towards partners, and had made up these fabulous stories about his life and his career and what he did, which is shocking because he was such a great athlete. It seems unnecessary that he lied, but he lied about so much and he looked like a buffoon. Tim Scott hasn't done any of that, right? And you don't have to embrace it was shocking for you to say it because you disagree with Democrats on so many issues, but yet you're still most certainly caucus
Tim Scott
with them.
Is a joke.
Tim Scott is not a joke. He is
An
somebody.
absolute
he
joke.
is somebody that's decided that the Democratic Party is not representing
As a
his
black
concerns.
man.
So
a black man.
So you're going to repeat
Tim
Biden? You
Scott
have to
is
vote
an
Republican. You have to vote
absolute
Democrat because you're a black
now,
man.
to answer your Biden question, Biden is a bigot and a coward, and the Democratic Party and Democratic leaders
who would you
should
vote
be
for
ashamed
over
of
them?
themselves for allowing Biden to get away with the record of racism that's documented attached to that man.
So Biden
Now,
or Scott, if you had to pick?
well, I wouldn't vote for Scott or Biden. You know why?
So you're going to.
Because Scott won't be the nominee, and Biden won't be either if some Democrat has the courage to step up and run against the man, I think that they're going to find someone.
So, Robert Kennedy already is, but who do
Right, but he's not viable.
why isn't he viable?
Because they see him as a right-wing nut and a conspiracy theorist.
Okay. Who do you think could run against Biden?
I'll be very honest with you. I say go get Michelle Obama.
Okay.
Go get Michelle
and
Obama.
That's been a conversation
I
point.
say go get Michelle Obama. I'm going to tell you somebody else who I think could do it. Just if they would run Democrat, who I think could possibly do it. Maybe Oprah Winfrey. Maybe she would have a shot on winning a Democratic nomination.
Okay.
Now, some of these old career politicians, they need to get out of the way. I think that's too much that's been running both parties.
But obviously, I took issue with the Bush dynasty and the Clinton dynasty because I don't think we need aristocracies here. Right? Michelle Obama, although wonderfully accomplished, intelligent woman, doesn't have a lot of public service under her belt. And of course, Oprah is just a billionaire.
But nor did Donald Trump.
So I don't disagree. Oprah, much like Trump, is just a billionaire TV personality, right? And at what point do we return to looking to the scholars and moving away from the ideologues?
Now you got a point. Now I'm gonna tell you somebody who I think could beat Trump and win a Republican nomination. You may think I sound crazy on this, but I'm gonna tell you somebody who I think could beat him right now. A non-politician who I think could beat him.
Okay.
Tom Brady. Let Tom Brady run.
Well,
Let Tom Brady decide he wants to run for the Republican nominee to become president. I guarantee you, I think Tom Brady would beat him hands down.
I don't think America embraces Brady and the Patriots as much as you apparently think they do.
The Republican Party does.
I don't think he has accomplished. I think a talking point there would be, well, Brady, with all your millions upon millions, why on earth would you need to take PPP money that was supposed to go to failing small businesses for your nonsense businesses when you're so rich, right? Brady seems like a nice enough guy.
Wait
He's
a minute.
great athlete.
All the corporate giants took that money.
Well,
All the corporate giants. And then Tom Brady can say, I took it for the same reason Wells Fargo took the money. I took it for the same reason Chase took the money.
Wells Fargo and Chase couldn't take that money.
No, Wells Fargo and Chase took government welfare. When they were about to collapse financially, they took government
which
handouts.
Was supposed to be for small business. A bunch of churches did, which was a little bit insane, right?
Why is that?
Well, because it's supposed to go to small businesses that pay taxes to keep those vehicles
And these churches
afloat.
are not small businesses?
No, they were. In fact, there was a lot of graft and greed, and a lot of these charismatic pastors buying jets with
But
their
nobody
PPP
could
money.
go to church for almost 18 months, 19 months. They survived from the donations of the congregants and the visitors. So nobody could go to church for 19 months. Why should they not be eligible for some financial help, especially if we got all the money to give to Ukraine and other nations like that don't do nothing to help America?
But maybe we should have had a program just for small businesses. Maybe we should have a program for all the displaced workers who maybe got a little meager check here or there. I think, 2 stimulus checks?
They did do that. And what happened? They didn't
little
want to go back to work.
Well, that's
Many
not
didn't want to
true.
go back to work.
Many
Many
people
decided
wanna
to
work
stay
in
home
America.
and not go back to work after COVID because they were getting free money sitting at home. In fact, some of them said, I make more money staying home than going to work.
Man, you sound just like Tim Scott. You're calling
No,
America
but it's true.
lazy.
Now, I'm not saying that. I'm saying those
Sounds
who did
like
not
it.
want to go back to work, who rather get a check and not go to work, they are someone that we should get off the corporate welfare system of America. They don't need that financial help. But a mother who has 3 kids and they all in daycare, she's making less by going to work than she's paying the daycare people.
Well, I agree. And that's why I've always said we need a much more robust social net. If we're going to tell people they can't have abortions, would you support telling people they can't?
In the cases of rape and incest and the loss of the mother's potential to her life, I agree with abortions. Outside of that, I'm a supporter of the right of choice. Choose who you're going to lay down with.
Okay. So, but you're not a supporter of women's reproductive freedom.
Yes, I am, but I'm not. I'm a supporter of your freedom of choice. Choose who you're gonna lay down with, but I'm not supporting you being 3 and 4 months pregnant, and in some cases they want to be 5 and 6 months pregnant, like one doctor did, brought the baby out and broke the baby's neck. I'm not supporting that.
Again, you're engaging in completely dishonest doublespeak.
That's not true.
I'll be honest about
one
my
doctor
position.
did break a baby's neck, pulling the baby out for an
I
abortion.
always know you're lying when you start interrupting me a bunch, but I will tell you my position on abortion is very clear. I think it's taking a life, and I think it's heartbreaking, but that is based on my religious beliefs, and I shouldn't impose my religious beliefs on women and other people who should come to their own conclusions about their religious beliefs and their feelings about bodily autonomy, because it should be the woman's choice, right? But if America really wants to have women having less abortions, we possibly, instead of having all these crazy policies, we should maybe consider having a robust safety net for young mothers, right? So there is more daycare available, have more free junior college and universities so people can go to school easier, and not create a welfare system that intentionally breaks homes and removes fathers from the home.
And so we should just eradicate personal responsibility in the process.
Okay, how so?
Because there are too many young men, especially in my community, and young women, who are having children that should not have children. There are too many young men who are getting women pregnant in my community in particular, and they're not ready to be fathers, and they don't even have a job, and getting some woman pregnant. Look, man, we need more personal responsibility and accountability when it comes to having children.
So how so? How do you suggest that, Tim
Now,
Scott?
let me say this, and be honest with you. I think that if a man gets a woman pregnant, there should be a law. He should have to have a job. No man should be allowed to get a woman pregnant and he don't have a job.
So
period.
You think forced servitude?
I believe that forcing that man to be gainfully employed and get a job so that child is not taken care of by the taxpayers, you and I, because he don't want to work. Wrong. No, brother, I'm sorry. But you want to have a lot of sex? Have a lot of work in plan then, brother. Because if you want to have a lot of sex with different women, like one brother came on TV, he got 12 children with 11 different women, and he thought that was funny. No, you should take ass to prison, brother. You got all them babies and don't want to take care of them and think that's funny? There should be a law against a man like that.
Well, there are laws, right? If a man like that isn't paying his child support, he can be arrested and put in custody, and I agree with that.
But why don't we be more proactive?
Right.
You ain't got a job, don't get nobody pregnant.
But if you really want to be more, I mean, you talk about these fables, they're not going to happen, right? No one's going to force people to get a job. No one's going to force people to do the right thing, right? And there's so many people in across the racial community, the racial spectrum. We got so many men that aren't doing what they should do for their children. But if you want to look at a big picture and you want to fix it, instead of throwing all the money we're talking about throwing away, right? We throw away hundreds of billions on defense. Many of it goes to other countries that does nothing for the American people. We are spending, Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, has just said, oh, we've got to take away this right to housing because we're being overwhelmed by our tens of thousands of migrants, illegal entrants, who are entitled to housing. They're putting veterans out on the street. We are putting Americans out on the street. And that, of course, pales in comparison to the millions that we're dealing with here in Texas, overwhelming our social services issue. Maybe we should start caring more about young American children. If your parents suck, that doesn't mean you should starve. If your parents suck and you're growing up poor in a poor neighborhood that's riddled with crime and drugs, it doesn't mean your school should suck and not be safe.
But okay,
so
but if you got bad parents, Charles, and you're a poor kid with bad parents, then the parents are the ones that get that check because it's in their name. And that parent is a very bad parent. That parent will get that check and never feed those kids. We have to put something in place.
There are laws against starving your children.
But we have to put something in place to where there is some type of oversight to make sure that some of these bad parents are not using drugs. I'm not against drug testing parents who receive welfare benefits. I'm not. Because if that's the case, some of these children would not have those checks that come from the taxpayers to help feed them given to the crack dealer or the dope man on the corner, like it happened in my family and other friends of mine, families in my community. The dope man got more of the welfare checks than the kids ever got to eat off
of. The
of.
CPS system, right? I mean, at some point,
don't get me started on that.
We have to have a far more government accountability. But right now, we live in this time in 2033. We live in this time in America where every newspaper, every media outlet is taking this African-American man who had tried to kidnap a 7-year-old, who had beat a 67-year-old stranger almost to death, who had committed all these violent crimes, who was continuing to commit violent crimes, right? When someone restrained him, they don't look at the fact that maybe the government should have had him in custody. They file manslaughter charges against the other restrained.
But according to the witnesses, Charles, on a train with them, the witness statements, white people too, stated that the man was talking crazy, but he never attempted to physically assault the gentleman with whom restrained him. He didn't physically assault anyone. He was talking crazy and he was threatening, yes, but he never committed an act to follow through on the threat.
Ample witnesses across the racial spectrum have come forward and said that Mr. Penny was protecting us. But that's not even my point, right? I'm not going to parse that. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened. But what's dishonest is taking these 10-year-old pictures of this man who has been terrorizing the subway system since 2015 and acting like he wasn't the person he was when he died. Instead, painting this false portrait of him that we would have never known his name. We'd have never known Jordan Neely's name if it was a white man who was choked out, or it was a black man who did the choking out, right? It's because the media wants us to hate each other, and they want to make criminals look like angels and everyone else look like criminals, especially, the new argument, it's white supremacy. You make this argument, white supremacy is the biggest threat to America. At the end of the day, we have a crime problem. And I don't care who commits the crime. What we don't need to do is give someone a diversion program when they shatter a woman's face for no reason, right? We need to have a problem. We need to have discussions about crime, but who suffers the most from crime? People of color, right? And who suffers from the poverty? People of color. So why don't we have solutions, actual solutions for people of color?
Don't have the criminal problem. There are countries in America right now, man, even right there in Europe, they don't have the gun violence we have, man. At all.
Well, we have
they don't have the violent crimes we have right there in Canada.
Actually, violent crime in Europe has exploded. Sweden hid,
but not like America.
Sweden hid their rape epidemic, which is out of control. It was tied to migrants, and they didn't want to admit that it was a problem. Right? And at some point, we need to look at what is driving crime in America. It's poverty. It's a lack of hope. It's a lack of opportunity. And you talk about not giving children benefits, not having better schools, not wasting the taxpayers' money. The taxpayer actually benefits in America if we have more opportunity, if we have better schools and more safety.
Because it strengthens the economy.
The professional grievances, people that make a living encouraging racial strife, whether it's on the right-wing extremist lunatics that want to make it seem like LGBT people are the biggest child molesters in the world, when the truth is, well, yet again, Catholic Church has been outed. Thousands of children being raped by thousands of priests, and it was covered up, right? So we have far more child attacks associated with organized religion than you do with the LGBT community. On the flip side, the Professional Grievance Committee on the left wants to push this narrative that white supremacy is the problem, it's the threat, it's the violence. Well, of course, if you look at the crime data, that's not the case.
But that's
right?
not
That's
white
not
supremacy.
the case at all.
But that's not white supremacy. Institutionalized white supremacy is a threat to all Americans.
What institutionalized white supremacy?
In education.
Sure. In education, where if you are a person of color and you apply to Harvard or Yale or UT or anywhere, you get pushed to the front of the line, and Asian kids and white kids get pushed to the back of the line.
In America, where black people have been here for 461 years.
There's no one that's been alive for 461 years.
We, as black people, have been in America for 461 years.
So you're a we with everyone you serve and share a complexion with?
Black people did not even get the right to truly vote until the late 1960s. So when you look at us, we're right at 50 years of having the right to even cast a vote without being persecuted or even killed in this country, and had the right to even go into the same restaurants as whites. Institutional racism does exist in America. and that needs to be dealt with.
But you said in
It must be
education.
more inclusive.
You said in
It must be
education.
more inclusive of all Americans, their educational system, their healthcare system, their banking and financial systems. Yes, oppressing black people in America did give the majority of white people a better financial opportunity in America, and we cannot pretend like financial
How many
oppression of
white
black
people
did
live
not
in
exist.
poverty in America, Quanell?
If you break it down just
Oh,
based
no, no.
on the numbers,
how many white
it's
people
more white
live,
folks on welfare than black
How many
people.
white people live
It's
in
more white
poverty
folks
in
on
America?
welfare than black
How many
people.
white people?
I'm not sure.
It's 16 million. How many black people live in poverty in America?
Because the numbers are different.
No.
Charles.
Let's
The
talk
numbers are
about
different,
aggregate
Charles.
numbers. I know you want to hide the truth.
numbers are different,
How many black
Charles.
people live in poverty in America?
Charles, the numbers are different.
About
Charles.
8 million. It's a higher per capita, but it's,
I believe it's more
double.
than that.
No, it's you should look
It
at
was
the
a lot more
numbers,
than
right?
that.
So you have 8 million African Americans and 16 million white Americans all living in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think any of them care about historical grievances, or do they just want better lives,
We do.
right? And what
We
you
do.
sell
We do.
is, hey, white
We do.
people, you don't.
We do.
Well, who's
You
we?
might
You know
not
what?
care,
You don't speak
but
for anyone
black
but
people
yourself.
care.
And
But
in
black
fact,
people
you
care.
use
Black people care.
Okay.
Black
So
people
you're
care.
speaking for
Now,
all
let
black
me-
people?
I didn't say that.
Well, you said we
I didn't
do.
say that, but statistically, black people do care about the racial problem in America because
No, no, no.
75% of black people in America
you
believe
don't think the
that there's a
people
racial
in poverty,
problem in this country.
You think the people in poverty want to believe the Democrat line that resources can only, I mean, you make the argument all the time that resources have to be decided on race, or possibly,
I didn't say that.
Possibly,
I didn't
maybe
say
we
that.
should, well, you
I
said the
didn't say that.
taxpayer,
I didn't
we don't
say
want
that.
kids, but all.
No.
But when it's somebody from the African American
Charles,
community,
I
you say
don't-
put them in the
Charles,
front
I don't
line.
support affirmative
Why
action.
don't we have
I
solutions
don't support affirmative
for
action.
all Americans?
I don't support affirmative action.
Well, that's fresh. It's new
And the
here.
problem is, when we had these solutions for Americans, they didn't include all Americans. When we had freedom of choice and freedom to pursue happiness in this country, it was for some Americans, not all Americans, and it went that way for hundreds of years. We cannot pretend like the vestiges of that scar tissue is still not residual in the black
No one
community
is
today.
arguing that there's not an economic legacy
And nothing
to
has
slavery.
been done
Instead, the argument is
holistically the right way to fix the problem.
Instead, the argument is, instead of like you, who always puts race first as the solution and makes
That's
an
not the
argument.
solution, man.
Instead, why don't we talk about solutions for all Americans, for the 30 million Americans of all races that live in poverty, or maybe 35 million. In Latin, there's not a clear number for people of Latin heritage. Why don't we have solutions for all of them? Why don't we have solutions for children so they're not starving? Why don't we have
Because,
better
Charles,
educational opportunities?
there cannot
Why
be
don't we have more
solutions
public safety
for
and police to
all
do their damn
Americans,
job?
Charles.
No, of course there can.
Cannot be
But
solutions.
you don't benefit from
there
it,
cannot
Quanell.
be solutions for all Americans where corporate, rich mega giants in the country lose profits. If you're going to do something for all Americans, it can only be done if it increases the profits of the rich, not decrease their wealth. Unless it's that way, it's never going to happen. And real solutions cannot be put forth for quote unquote all Americans without addressing
But
the
that's why you don't
problem
like
of
Tim
the wealth
Scott.
gap in
Because
America.
Tim Scott is saying, hey, look, we need real solutions for all Americans. So you call him all these horrible names. We started
What
with this.
horrible
All
name?
You referred to him in a horrible way.
What horrible
you
name?
suggested he was like Herschel Walker.
Yes.
You made reference to characters and Roots.
Yeah, Chicken George and Fiddler.
Right. You
He
call
remind me
him
of
a
both.
sellout, right?
He remind me of Chicken George
You're
and
probably
Fiddler.
not using the language you want to use to denigrate this man
No.
who simply
He spoke
wants
grammatically correct.
solutions. He wants
He spoke the
solutions
King's English
for
very
all
well,
Americans.
but he looked like a brother who was afraid of his own people.